Now, there's lots of other elements that you can add to floor plans other than just walls, doors, and windows. So in this movie, we're going to look at the component tool, and we use the component tool to add a variety of categories. If they added a dedicated button for every category in Revit, then the ribbon would be just filled with icons. So what they've done is to kind of shorthand that is they've actually added just a single component button, which is kind of a catch-all and allows for the placement of several different categories. Let's start by actually clicking the component tool, and its shortcut is CM, as you can see. And let's open up the type selector, and what you're going to see is it's a rather eclectic list here. We have a desk, a parking space, and a tree family loaded. There's also a couple random items down here for supports. Now, none of those are really items that I need right now, but as you can see, it's a broad list of categories. So what I want to do is go right over here to load family, like we talked about in the previous movie with doors and windows. And then from the library, I can load in some appropriate categories. Now, what I want to do is bring in some equipment for the mechanical room here, some stuff in the kitchen, and some fixtures in the toilet rooms. So let's start with a furnace. Now, I'm going to back up to my metric library, go into the metric folder, then scroll down and find my mechanical folder, architectural, airside components, and then find the furnaces. In that folder, there's a single furnace item. So I'll go ahead and select that family and click open. Unlike the doors and windows, this is what I call a freestanding family. Notice that I can place this family anywhere that I want. It doesn't require me to place it on a wall host, for example. Similarly to the doors and windows, you can use your space bar, but in this case, instead of flipping the family, it will actually rotate it. And by default, it rotates in 90-degree increments. But if you take your mouse and you place it over something that's at a different angle first, and then tap your space bar, it'll match that orientation. So we can do that in 90-degree increments as well. And then if you wanted to reset that orientation, you could just move back out into empty space and tap the space bar one more time. Now, I want to orient it horizontally like this, and then I want to come over here and kind of get myself in this lower portion of the mechanical room and allow a little bit of space around it, and then I'll click to place that furnace. Okay, so it's as simple as that. You load family, find the component you want, set the orientation, and then click to place it. So let's go to load family again and find some more stuff. So I'm going to go back up one folder, go to metric, and then this time I'm going to go to the specialty equipment folder. In there, I have several subfolders, and I will use the domestic folder next. And then in here, there are several items that we might want to load. So using your shift and your control keys, you can actually load more than one family at the same time. So I'm going to load a dryer. I'm going to load a range, a refrigerator, and a washer. Now I'm going to start with just those 4 items, but if you want, you could also do a microwave or an exhaust hood or a dishwasher. It's entirely up to you. But I'll do those 4 items. I'll click open, and that will load in all 4 of those families. Now it looks as though it put the refrigerator here on my type selector, so we'll place that one first. And if you open up the type selector, you can actually see that in some cases there are different sizes. So right now it's got the smallest refrigerator on my cursor currently. So maybe I want to do a slightly larger one. So I'll go to the 660 by 760, and I'll come over here and kind of zoom in a little in the kitchen and maybe place it lined up with that wall there. You see how it's trying to line up, but set it away from the wall just a little bit. Now it went 100 millimeters, which is a little bit far away from the wall. I'll change that to 50. So notice how in previous movies we talked about temporary dimensions. They work the same way here with other components as well. Let's pan slightly, change to the range. I'll choose the larger size range, tap the space bar a couple times to orbit it around, and in this case, I'll let it snap right to the wall and place it right about there, halfway on the wall. Then I'll add the washer and dryer, and you see how those will try and snap to one another. You can always fine-tune the placements of these things later. Let me zoom back out a little bit, and I need to add a toilet fixture in each of these toilet rooms. So I'm going to go to component one more time, click load family again, in my metric folder, scroll down, find the plumbing folder, then architectural, and then fixtures, and then find the water closets. Now here you're going to notice that there's actually 2 different domestic toilets. There's a 2D version and a 3D version. In large projects where you have dozens, if not hundreds, of fixtures, it might be advantageous to actually choose a 2D version because it will reduce the file size and help boost performance. In this case, we're doing a very small condominium layout. I doubt that there would be any noticeable difference between the two, so I'm actually going to choose the 3D version of the toilet in this case. Now, when I open it up and you look here in the plan, notice that even though we loaded a 3D version, it actually does a two-dimensional symbol when you're in plan, so it does that automatically. I'll show you what it looks like in 3D in just a few moments. Let me tap the spacebar to orient it around, snap it to this wall, spin it around here, snap it to this wall, and then I'll click the Modify tool to cancel. Now I'm going to do Zoom to Fit, and that's the basic elements that we wanted to add here. And I promised you a look at the 3D, so let's see how we can do that. So to see this model and how it's shaping up in 3D, you can come up here to your Quick Access toolbar, and you're looking for a small little icon that looks like a tiny birdhouse. This is called the default 3D view icon. Now, when you click this, it will create an axonometric view of the model, and if you look over here on the project browser, you'll notice that there's a 3D views branch, and when I expand that, the name of that default 3D view has curly brackets around it. So I often refer to this as curly bracket 3D, but that's the default 3D view. Now, in a previous movie, we talked about orbiting in 3D. There are two ways you can actually do that. The way that we talked about previously was to hold the Shift key down in the middle wheel button and just drag, and that will orbit it around. But you can actually drag the view cube as well. So just sort of click and drag on the cube, and it will orbit around. If you drag this little turntable at the bottom, it will also orbit it in 3D, but it won't change the height. So that's just a slightly more controlled way to orbit it around. So using whichever method you prefer, what I'm going to actually do is tip down so that I can see into those toilet rooms, and then I'll roll my wheel to zoom in, and you can see that it does create an actual 3D toilet, even though in the plan view we were seeing a flat two-dimensional symbol for it. If I come over here to these other portions of the plan, you can see my furnace right there, and if I spin around this way and zoom in, you can see my washer, dryer, and my range. So when you're ready to begin adding other kinds of fixtures and components to your Revit projects, it's as simple as clicking the component tool, loading family, and then browsing to the components you want and placing them in.